I do want to ask you. I remember asking you during the campaign whether the pitch by your opponents that it's better to have someone in government as your MP versus someone who's going to sit in opposition. Was that, you think, the biggest thing that gave you the fight this time around?
Yeah, I think so. Because if you look at where the votes went, we lost a lot of urban votes. And that's precisely the kind of area where that kind of argument appeals. That that look, you vote for our guy, you get a minister, he can deliver so much more for you. You vote for that guy, he gets to be an opposition leader. What you're going to get, that's
Hmm.
sort of an argument which, frankly, I can see why they could attempt it, and it certainly gained them some dividends. But what's wonderful is that the rural areas, the coastal areas, minority areas, people stayed loyal to me in ways that I certainly have been very touched by. I think we didn't expect it to be quite as close as it turned out to be. Though 16,000 is still not too bad. I have colleagues who have won with a lot less in this parliament. But I will say that I went out of my way immediately after the results were out to congratulate both my opponents on a spirited fight, Rajiv Chandrasekhar for coming that close, and Panian Ravindran of the CPI for taking 2.5 lakh votes, much of which would have otherwise come to me. So it certainly was a close election, and I'm proud that I'm now the first person in the history of Trivandrum and the history of Parliament to have been elected 4 times in a row.
I remember also asking you about, what you can do as an MP, and you seemed to suggest at that time that there's fairly not that much that an MP can do, particularly when the state government and the central government are both not your party. But wouldn't you have to repay this faith that your constituents have shown in you with greater deliverables and more work for your
Well,
constituency? Did you see that as a challenge?
I've worked extremely hard, Shivani, and they know that, so I'll continue doing that. But what I will do is raise my voice in the context of a much more robust opposition. There are issues I have raised periodically which have not got the traction that they might otherwise deserve because we have a government that's totally unresponsive. Perhaps now we'll have a government that's a little more accommodative and conciliatory, number one. And there are issues, for example, coastal erosion is a serious crisis in the constituency. And this is something which entirely depends on the goodwill of both sets of governments, and we need to get them cracking on this. And I intend to make that my number one priority right now. Getting resources to be able to protect our sea coast, which is both in the national interest and in the state's duty. But a
Oh, yes.
second thing that I will want to do consistently is to raise my voice for the values represented by the people of Thiruvananthapuram and Kerala, frankly, on various national issues, where the government is pursuing policies that stand against the values and principles of Kerala. I will continue being the robust opponent that I have been. I mean, for example, I spoke out against the amendment to the UAPA, which allows the government to declare anyone a terrorist and lock them up without bail or charge or trial. I oppose the CAA because it brought religion into citizenship for the first time in our history. I oppose the NRC for similar reasons. I stood up for things that the people of Kerala believe in. And because our parliamentary system allows the government to set the agenda in parliament and gives the opposition no opportunity to set its own agenda, all I can do is raise my voice, and that I will, and I will do so strongly and I hope effectively. And that's what the people of Thiruvananthapuram also expect from me.
You spoke about what Kerala stands for and the values, etc. I do want to ask you about this whole north-south divide that was spoken about as far as pre-election is concerned. Now, if you look at the numbers, in Kerala, the BJP has won its very first seat. It has become a very close second in the seats that you represented. It has improved its vote share even further. In fact, if you look at all of the south states, the BJP has actually cumulatively got more votes than the Congress party in the five southern states and including Puducherry. So, do you think it's time to rest that north versus south divide? It's time to finally accept that BJP also has acceptability in the south and it's not an outsider.
No, a couple of correctives right there, Shivani. Number one, Suresh Gopi, my friend who won in Thrissur for the BJP, ran a totally non-BJP campaign. He ran a secular campaign, used that word frequently, appealed to the minorities, reached out to them, and got a significant percentage of minority votes as well. In fact, his campaign demonstrates the limits of the BJP's communal messaging across the South. Secondly, in Kerala, the BJP went from 13% to 16%, and in Tamil Nadu from 7% to 10%. These are hardly earth-shaking numbers. You're not looking at
From
something
3% to
some
10
people lost.
actually in Tamil Nadu.
Beg your pardon?
From 3% to 10% in Tamil Nadu.
3 to 10. I think they contested more seats this time, you see. That may be 2. Similarly, where you talk about votes, the fact is that in Tamil Nadu, we didn't contest that many seats. We contested 9 seats, whereas the BJP contested, I've forgotten how many, but I think over 20. In Andhra Pradesh, the BJP had a very strong regional ally. We went on our own. So all of these things make a difference. And I don't think just looking at mechanical numbers will give us an accurate estimate of what a fair fight. Imagine if all the regional parties sat aside and you asked the people of the South whether you would prefer the BJP or the Congress. I have very little doubt which way they would go on the key issues that set the two parties apart.
Okay, let me talk to you a little bit about the national scenario. How do
Yeah.
you look at the results as far as the India alliance and the Congress is concerned? The opposition has been very gracious in accepting that they're going to sit in the opposition. They're not even going to try to, formulate a number as it stands right now. But would we see, for example, less blockages of the parliament? Would we see, more work getting done, which is possibly what the public also wants?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we're going to have a working committee meeting of the Congress Party on Saturday. This is bound to be one of the things that's discussed, and certainly there'll be internal conversations as well. My own voice has consistently been raised in favor of debate. And I think it's all the more valid in a situation where we have 230 plus opposition MPs who can stand up robustly to any unreasonable initiatives of the government. I also think that, frankly, given the fashion that the BJP started when they were in opposition of disrupting the House whenever they felt they couldn't get their way, given that we now have double the numbers they had then in the opposition, we have 230, they had 116 when they were in opposition, they may as well realize that it's in their interest to be conciliatory and accommodative because the opposition precisely can do unto them what they have done unto us when we were in power. So that too, I think, is an argument for a different approach. I mean, it used to be said in the UPA days and before that the Congress Affairs, Parliamentary Affairs Minister would spend more time in the opposition benches than in his own. The BJP has never followed that line. They've sat on their high haunches and issued diktats from the other side of the fence. Maybe they need to change and try a different approach now in dealing with the opposition parties and trying to persuade them of the merit of some of the things they want to do in Parliament. In any case, Parliament will no longer be a notice board for their whims. It'll no longer going to be a rubber stamp for the cabinet's decisions. They're going to have to talk them through with us.
My final two questions. The opposition has also been seen often, in fact, till 2 days or a day before the results were announced, creating this impression that there's large-scale rigging that takes place in Indian electoral system. They've questioned the EVMs, but even otherwise suggested that beyond that, the system is not neutral and not fair. Don't you think after these results, it's finally time to bury any questions on the Indian electoral system and Indian democracy?
No, Shivani, I agree with you that the actual casting and counting of votes was not in any way doctored, and the results are real results. But the argument made by the opposition that the playing field was not level is extremely difficult to challenge. If you look at many of the decisions or non-decisions of the Election Commission, they did not behave with the kind of neutrality we expect of them. If you look at many of the conditions during the election, the freezing of the Congress Party's bank accounts, the locking up of two chief ministers, Arvind Kejriwal and Hemant Soren, who are both heads of regional parties. If you look at issue after issue like that, you get the impression that this was a race in which one side had its hands and feet tied, and we still managed somehow to break free and come close to the finish line. I would say that the one thing that no one can doubt is that the actual casting and counting of votes was free and fair. And that is something that I have insisted on myself in the past. You may have noticed I have never myself cast doubt on that process. But I was also conscious of the Varieties of Democracy Institute in Sweden, notoriously or famously saying that India is no longer a democracy, it's an electoral autocracy, by which is meant that you elect your leaders fairly, but then they conduct themselves like autocrats. That is what this election, I hope, will change. And we will once again go back to being a truly consensual, collegial, accommodative democracy.
You hope Modi 3.0 is going to be different, mostly because they'll have to contend with the allies. What is your expectation of the third term of Prime Minister Narendra
They
Modi?
have to contend with their allies, number one. Number two, Mr. Modi has diminished authority within his own party because the kind of authority he had when he kept winning majorities on his own will not be available to him when he comes down to 240. And thirdly, because they have such a robust and large opposition to deal with every day in Parliament that they'll know
Hmm.
that they have to take into account views rather than merely go the my way or the highway route, which is their usual approach in the last, particularly the second term. So all that should change, and we're looking forward to a different kind of government from the one we've seen the first two terms.
My final question. You were also one of those voices that batted for internal reforms in the Congress party. In fact, you fought the election for the presidentship. With this result, do internal reforms of the Congress party practically get shelved?
Well, look, I think some reform has already happened. There's been a lot more energy infused at various levels of the party. There's no question that the result has strengthened both the hands of the Congress president and of our starmost campaigner, Rahul Gandhi, who are both much
Hmm.
stronger. And they will really be the ones who will have an opportunity to decide how much farther they want to go. I don't think anybody in the Congress would disagree that we still have some work to do in the grassroots level to strengthen our booth level management in many parts of the country. And no one is going to pretend that we can afford to just sit on our laurels right now. But I would say, on the whole, there is understandably and justifiably a lot of congratulations in the air within and around the Congress party. And this is not a time to be raining on that parade.
All right. All right. So maybe I'll ask you this question a little bit later. Thank you, Shashi Tharoor, for speaking to me. All the very best and congratulations.
Always a pleasure talking to you, Shivani. See you. Take care.